Welcome to the Classic Soap Operas podcast, and welcome to the Deep Dive. We are the place where we take a stack of sources, articles, and dedicated research and really break down why some of the most ambitious TV projects either soared, became absolute legends.
Right, creating those cultural moments.
Exactly. Or, like today's topic, why they just sort of rode off into the sunset after only one season.
Yeah, today we're digging into the short, really fascinating and ultimately kind of tragic story of the Yellow Rose. This was an NBC primetime soap from '83. And, I mean, on paper, it looked like it had everything, absolutely everything going for it.
It really did. A huge, expensive budget, location shooting right there in West Texas.
An incredible cast. I mean, really top-flight dramatic actors.
And it even got good reviews initially. Critics seemed to like it.
They did. And yet, poof,
Yeah.
gone in 22 episodes.
So our mission today is pretty clear. We need to figure out piece by maybe agonizing piece why this show, this huge star-studded effort by NBC, which, let's be honest, was clearly built and expensively built to challenge the absolute dominance of Dallas and Dynasty back then.
Oh, absolutely. They needed this show to work.
Why did it fail so quickly? And, so spectacularly? This wasn't just some minor pilot NBC threw out there. This felt like their last big, multi-million-dollar gamble to get a piece of that early 80s primetime soap action.
That gravy train, right.
You've hit the nail on the head. The stakes for NBC, they couldn't have been higher. You gotta remember, in 1983, NBC was, they were really struggling, often dead last in the ratings. They were desperate, absolutely desperate for a flagship serial drama, something that can, maybe redefine their image a bit and pull in a steady audience week after week.
Right. So we're going to set the stage here, this West Texas saga. We'll talk about the epic scope they were aiming for, that initial vision, which actually promised something different, a gritty, more realistic Western drama. And then, how it all collapsed under kind of the combined weight of some really questionable creative choices and, frankly, a truly terrible time slot.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start right at the beginning. What was the TV world like when this show was born?
Right. You absolutely have to start with the context. The great soap wars of the early 80s. I mean, it sounds dramatic, but it kind of was. When The Yellow Rose premiered, October '83, TV wasn't just friendly to these big, serialized primetime dramas. It was completely dominated by them.
They were huge, not just hits. They were like cultural phenomena, weren't they?
Totally, driving all the office water cooler talk, guaranteeing millions and millions of viewers every single week. It was appointment television.
And it was a brutal ratings fight. NBC was just getting hammered, right? You had CBS, the original giant in this space.
Yeah, CBS had Dallas. I mean, Dallas was arguably the biggest show on the planet after Who Shot JR happened.
Unbelievable phenomenon.
And they also had Falcon Crest, which was getting a bit older but still pulling viewers, and the darker, maybe more complex spinoff, Knots Landing. CBS was stacked.
And then ABC comes along with Dynasty. Pure 80s, high camp, high fashion, high glamour.
Shoulder pads everywhere.
Yeah.
Champagne, power suits, and let's be real, pretty cartoonish villains and melodrama, but people loved it.
They ate it up. So CBS and ABC basically owned the genre. They had the big four power hitters.
And NBC was just desperate. They needed their own horse in the race. Specifically, they needed a top 20 serial soap. Badly.
They had tried before, though. This wasn't their first attempt at a big soap.
No, they weren't totally naive. They tried with Flamingo Road. You might remember that one with Morgan Fairchild.
Vaguely, yeah.
But that one, as the sources say, kind of petered out by '81. It just didn't catch fire.
So that failure probably put even more pressure on the Yellow Rose, right? They couldn't afford another quiet flop.
Exactly. It meant this new show couldn't be subtle or low budget. They needed a blockbuster. Something that screamed Texas power. Big money. But also have that core family drama, something that could keep people hooked long term.
And that desperation, it seems, is what led to The Yellow Rose.
It fueled it. Created by John Wilder and Michael Zinberg, produced by Paul Freeman. And the sources are really clear on this. The show was, and I quote, at least partly inspired by the more cultish elements of the soap opera Dallas.
So they were looking at Dallas.
They felt they could do that whole Western Texas thing better, more authentically, maybe less, ridiculously over the top than Dallas sometimes got. That was the pitch anyway.
And the ambition, just looking back at the production details, it seems massive for the time.
Oh, it was huge. This wasn't some cheap schedule filler. NBC touted it heavily. Big budget, which crucially allowed for all that expensive location shooting in West Texas. They wanted that visual realism, that big sky country feel.
Yeah, you couldn't fake that on a Hollywood backlot, could you?
Not convincingly, no. And that commitment, it wasn't just about pretty pictures. When NBC gave it a full 22-episode order right out of the gate,
Before they even aired the first episode.
before a single rating came in. That's a massive vote of confidence, both financially and professionally. They were basically betting the farm that this was their answer to the Ewings. They clearly expected it to run for years and years.
Okay, so if you're spending that kind of money and making that kind of bet, the core premise has to be pretty strong. Tell us about the ranch itself, because it sounds like it's more than just a setting.
Oh, it's central. The ranch is also called the Yellow Rose, and it's huge, 200,000 acres of cattle and oil land in West Texas.
200,000 acres. It's hard to even picture that.
It's enormous, almost 300 square miles. A massive empire. But crucially, an empire that's constantly under threat, from inside the family and outside. The show is all about the Champion family who own it. But the core conflict, right from episode 1, is rooted in something more than just money. It's about moral integrity, about legacy.
And this is where it starts to sound different from Dallas, which, seemed pretty happy to drill wherever they could find oil.
Exactly. The setup is classic Western conflict. The late patriarch, Wade Champion, he made his son Roy, the conscientious one, promise him he'd never scar the pristine land with oil pumps.
Wow, okay. That's a big promise to uphold when you own oil land in Texas.
Huge promise.
Yeah.
And it immediately sets up this compelling conflict. Legacy, the integrity of the land, versus cold, hard financial reality. The show mentions falling meat prices, so Roy is constantly staring bankruptcy in the face. Keep the promise, lose the ranch. Break the promise, betray your father's dying wish. All while his rich oil-baron neighbors, the Hollisters, are practically breathing down his neck, wanting that land.
So right away, it's cattle versus crude, a moral battle. That feels much more like a classic Western, maybe even a bit Shakespearean, than just who's sleeping with who or who's plotting the next corporate takeover.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That suggests a thematic weight that maybe Dallas didn't always aim for.
It sounds like they were really aiming high creatively.
They were. They wanted that epic, sprawling family saga feel like you'd get in a classic movie like Giant, or maybe the family focus of a show like The Big Valley. But, grafted onto that addictive week-to-week soap opera structure. The difference in intent compared to its rivals felt really palpable in those early episodes.
But that kind of ambition, it's only as good as the actors you get to sell it, right? Which brings us to the cast, because the names involved are seriously impressive.
Oh, absolutely. When you look at the lineup they assembled for the Yellow Rose, it just screams quality. It confirms the network, and the producers weren't just going for flash. They wanted real dramatic weight. This was a statement cast.
Yeah, it signals they intended this to be taken seriously, not just as another slice of high camp.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And leading the charge, the absolute definition of rugged Western authenticity, Sam Elliott as Chance McKenzie.
Terrific casting.
Isn't it? He's the classic outsider figure.
Yeah.
An ex-con just got out of prison. And crucially, he's the illegitimate son of the dead patriarch, Wade Champion.
Okay. Instant drama.
Instant drama. He's that rugged, quietly philosophical presence. The catalyst basically dropped into this carefully constructed family dynamic, ready to shake everything up.
And Elliot's whole persona, that laconic, thoughtful cowboy thing he does so well, that's the polar opposite of the slick, calculating oil men you usually saw in these shows, like J.R. Ewing.
Totally. And playing opposite him as the legitimate son, Roy Champion, was David Soul.
Fresh off Starsky and Hutch. So, a known TV face, but in a very different kind of role.
Very different. Roy isn't the smooth operator. He's defined by his internal struggle. He's the good son, the conscientious one, dealing with the crushing weight of his father's legacy, that promise about the oil, and the very real threat of financial ruin.
And the sources really emphasize the dynamic between Soul and Elliot playing these half-brothers. It wasn't immediate hatred, was it?
No, and that was one of the show's early strengths. They weren't trying to kill each other from day one. They were portrayed as two fundamentally decent men trying to navigate this impossible situation, both bound by blood to the same ranch, the same legacy.
Which is already a departure from the constant Ewing feuds.
Definitely. But of course, you need that essential heart, that romantic spark, maybe a bit of sex appeal.
Mm-hmm.
And they certainly found that with Sybil Shepherd as Colleen Champion.
Wade's young widow.
Young, sexy, and as the sources describe her, perfectly cast as a headstrong filly.
Huh. I can picture that. And that image. Sybil Shepherd in those slim fit jeans, maybe black leather chaps, commanding this huge ranch.
Yeah.
That must have been a deliberate visual hook for the 80s audience.
Oh, for sure. She also had her daughter with her, Elsie Champion, which stood for Love Child, apparently played by Michelle Bennett. So Another layer to the family dynamic there.
And the rest of the champion clan, it wasn't just these main players, right?
He was a sprawling family, adding complexity. You had Edward Albert playing Ramon Quisto Champion. He was another one of Wade's sons, this one half Mexican.
Okay, that's interesting. Adds a different dimension.
It did. It brought in necessary cultural texture, depth to the whole narrative about multi-generational Texas land ownership. And then Roy had his own son, Whit Champion, played by Tom Shanley. Described as headstrong, maybe a bit naive. The point was, the champions weren't monolithic. They were complex, fractured, relatable in their tensions.
But the show didn't just rely on the main family drama. It seems like it really tried to root itself in that Western tradition with the supporting cast, too.
Yeah.
There's this great phrase in the source material about a Greek cowboy chorus.
Isn't that brilliant? It's so spot on. That refers to Noah Beery Jr. as Luther Dillard and Ken Curtis as Hoyt Coriel.
Legends. From classic Westerns, Festus.
Exactly. These guys were cast as the crusty old-timers, the ranch hands who had actually worked the land, settled it alongside the patriarch, Wade. They weren't just background dressing. They were vital for authenticity.
So they'd chime in on the action.
Pretty much. They functioned just like that Greek chorus, commenting on what was happening, passing down the history of the ranch, grounding all the high-stakes family drama in this believable, lived-in Western world. The source material lovingly calls their dialogue authentic frontier gibberish.
Huh. I love that. That's such a subtle but really significant difference from Dallas, isn't it? Dallas was all about the glitzy boardroom, the South Fork patio. The Yellow Rose seems like it wanted you to feel the dirt, the actual work of the ranch.
Absolutely. And Will Sampson was also there as a recurring ranch hand, John Strongheart, which further emphasized that genuine working ranch environment. It wasn't just a playground for rich people.
Okay, but like you said, every good soap needs great villains.
Yeah.
The pressure has to come from somewhere. Enter the Hollisters.
Right. They were designed to put constant, intense pressure on the champions. And the anchor of all that external conflict was the legendary Chuck Connors as Jeb Hollister.
The rifleman himself, playing the bad guy.
And playing him brilliantly by all accounts. He's the perfect archetype.
Yeah.
The vengeful neighbor who believes he was cheated out of his birthright.
What was his beef, specifically?
Jeb is Roy's main nemesis, and he's fueled by this deep, simmering bitterness because, years ago, he lost the Yellow Rose Ranch to Wade Champion in a drunken horse race.
No way. He lost a 200,000-acre ranch in a drunken horse race.
According to the backstory, yes, talk about a source of conflict, losing an empire over a youthful drunken bet. It's simple, it's primal, it's perfect cinematic Western drama. And he's been twisted inside about it ever since.
That's an amazing grudge to carry. So Jeb's whole life is about getting that ranch back.
By any means necessary. Legal tricks, intimidation, outright violence, whatever it takes. He considers it his birthright, and he's determined to reclaim it.
And he had kids involved too, right? To complicate things.
He did. Steve Sandor played his son, Lenny Hollister, who was described as basically psychotic and volatile. Jeb's unpredictable weapon, essentially. And Deborah Shelton played his daughter, Juliette Hollister. She was maybe a bit more conflicted, sometimes struggling with her father's ruthless methods, but still caught up in the family's war against the champions. But Jeb, Chuck Connors' character, he was the vital, granite-like anchor for all that external conflict. He wasn't just another rival oil man. He represented the dark side of Texas ambition, fueled by this ancient personal wound.
Wow. Okay, so on paper, this really does look like a winner. Great cast, amazing setting, a core conflict with real stakes, and a truly menacing villain. So what did that initial vision look like on screen? How did it actually try to be different?
Well, this is where the what might have been aspect really kicks in. Because those early episodes, they apparently showed exactly what the Yellow Rose could have been and why it got that initial critical praise. It wasn't trying to be Dallas Part 2. It was actively trying maybe elevate the genre a little.
How so? How did it differentiate itself from the Ewings and the Carringtons?
That's the key point.
Yeah.
While the Texas setting obviously invited Dallas comparisons, stylistically, it deliberately went in a different direction. It seemed to be taking cues from more classic American storytelling.
Like what?
Like the epic sweep of the movie Giant, that multi-generational land saga. Or the strong family focus, maybe even matriarchal focus sometimes with Colleen, like in The Big Valley. And the emotional stakes felt higher, maybe aiming for something almost Shakespearean in the family conflicts.
So less focus on just business deals and affairs.
More focus on straight, realistic drama, just grafted onto that weekly soap structure. The sources really stress this. The champions were not all that rich. At least not Carrington-level rich where money is no object.
Okay, that's a big difference right there.
Huge. Their struggles felt more serious because they were played without that operatic hype or the cartoonish va-voom that really defined Dynasty and sometimes Dallas. When the champions had money problems, it felt like a real threat. They were fighting to keep the integrity of the ranch, not just, fighting over stock options.
I do wonder, though, how relatable can a family fighting over 200,000 acres really be to the average viewer? That's still pretty rarefied air.
That's a fair question. But the relatability, I think, was supposed to come through the dialogue and the emotional sincerity. That was a huge contrast to the often stylized, witty, almost theatrical dialogue you got on Dynasty.
So the way they spoke was different?
Yeah, much lower key, more realistic. Sam Elliott's Chance Mackenzie, he sounded like a real cowboy, thoughtful, maybe a bit philosophical, not just a businessman spouting jargon. He seems genuinely conflicted about wanting Colleen, about his place as the illegitimate son. He wasn't delivering zingers. He was talking about land, loyalty, things that felt grounded.
And David Soul is Roy.
He wasn't playing a rich playboy trying to avoid work. He sounded like a genuinely tortured leader carrying this immense weight. His father's impossible promise, the serious financial instability, the fear of failing his family. Those are pretty universal burdens, even if the scale is Texan.
Yeah, I can see that. The pressure felt real.
And that grounded quality, it really shone through in the central family dynamic, especially between the half-brothers, Chance and Roy. It was layered, nuanced.
Not just immediate enemies.
No, they weren't instantly trying to destroy each other. They were portrayed as decent guys actually trying to get along, find common ground, even trying to forgive each other for the sake of the family, for the ranch.
That is a massive departure from JR and Bobby Ewing. Their relationship was built almost entirely on backstabbing and business rivalry, wasn't it?
Pretty much from the get-go. The Yellow Rose seemed to be trying for a different kind of tension, more about cooperation under extreme stress rather than just inevitable betrayal.
Which, arguably, makes the conflicts that do arise potentially more impactful, because they come from circumstance, not just inherent evilness.
Exactly. It felt more earned. And then you layer in that essential four-way triangle you need for soap opera romance, but even that felt a bit more grounded.
Okay, let's untangle that romantic knot. It sounds complicated.
It was messy, but in a relatable way. You have Chance, Sam Elliott, wanting Colleen, the widow, but he also feels this sort of responsibility, maybe even kinship, toward his Grace Mackenzie, the ranch housekeeper, played by Susan Ann Speck.
Okay.
Grace, meanwhile, she's deeply conflicted. She clearly has feelings for Chance, but she also knows he represents disruption, maybe trouble. So sometimes she wants him, sometimes she just wants him gone.
And Roy, David Soul's character.
Roy is worried about Chance's intentions on multiple fronts. Towards Colleen, who is legally his stepmother, but also young and attractive, and towards the ranch itself. What does this outsider really want? It was this beautiful, complicated tangle of conflicted desires, much more adult and serious, perhaps, than the usual bed-hopping you got on other soaps.
And the villainy. You mentioned Chuck Connors as Jeb Hollister. How was he presented? Was he just a mustache-twirling bad guy?
Not at all. He provided that crucial anchor, driving the external plot. And the sources give some great examples of his performance. There's apparently a scene where he brutally whips his own son, Lenny, the psychotic one, with a cane.
Whoa. Okay, that establishes his character pretty quickly.
Instantly. Sets him up as this brutal, old-school force. He wasn't some smiling, scheming boardroom type. He was visceral, almost elemental in his anger.
And there's that quote mentioned in our notes, his line when propositioning someone, "It gets better upstairs."
Yeah, apparently delivered with this granite-like charisma. It says everything, doesn't it? He's driven, he's menacing, he's completely dominant. He felt less like a typical soap opera villain and more like a classic, terrifying Western antagonist driven by this decades-long quest for vengeance.
Which is probably why those early episodes work so well. They had that balance.
The perfect balance. And yes, okay, the show definitely delivered on the eye candy element that primetime in the 80s demanded. But even that felt kind of integrated into the Western style.
You mentioned Sybil Shepherd in the Jeans and Chaps. The source calls her a complete POA, piece of work, I assume?
Huh. Yes, I think that's the implication. Looking incredible, playing perfectly off Sam Elliott's kind of silent, rugged sexiness.
And there's that quote where her character sees him shirtless.
Right. Colleen apparently leers believably at Chance and says, "You'd make some centerfold." It's sexy, it's appealing, but it feels like it belongs in that environment. Ranch heat, not penthouse glamour.
Plus, they didn't just have people talking in rooms. There was action, right? Honoring the Western setting.
Absolutely. This wasn't just cocktail sipping and arguing indoors. The drama was punctuated by real, solid action. Gunplay, big stunts, they mentioned a mining explosion, a rock slide, runaway cattle trucks, rodeos. It felt like it respected the genre it was playing in while adding that serialized drama on top.
So summing up that initial phase, it sounds like up until about the halfway point of the season, it was this masterful blend. Epic scale, authentic setting, fantastic actors, and high-quality, grounded writing.
Critically, yeah. It really should have been the best new drama of that 1983-84 season, based on the ingredients and the early execution.
Which brings us right back to that haunting question. If the foundation was so solid, the cast so strong, the initial vision so clear, how on earth did it fall apart so quickly?
And that's where we have to pivot. Because success in television, as we know, is such a fragile, sometimes illogical thing. Sometimes it just doesn't matter how good your show is if the strategy around it is completely wrong.
Or if you panic and mess with what's working. Let's get into the fatal missteps, external and internal, that led to this really spectacular collapse.
Okay, first things first, the big external factor. The one that was basically, you could argue, an active scheduling sabotage by NBC itself.
Yeah.
The time slot.
Right, you said it was bad.
It was terrible. This show, NBC's big hope, their expensive gamble, was, quote, stuck on a slow Saturday night at 10 p.m.
Ouch. Saturday at 10 p.m. in 1983. That sounds like a death sentence for a new drama.
It pretty much was for several reasons. First, Saturday night itself was traditionally seen as a graveyard slot for new pricey dramas. A lot of the target audience was just out of the house.
And second, 10:00 p.m. That put it up against some heavy hitters, didn't it?
Directly against massive established competition. Specifically, the second half of the CBS Saturday Night Movie.
Ah, the movie block. People commit to a movie, right?
Exactly. That CBS movie block had this huge gravitational pull. The sources make a great point. If you, the viewer, were already half an hour into a movie on CBS, even if it wasn't a great movie, you generally didn't switch channels halfway through to jump into a brand new, potentially complex family saga like The Yellow Rose.
So potential viewers, people who might have actually loved the show, maybe never even found it, or couldn't easily sample it.
Precisely. And then, making matters catastrophically worse, was the lead-in show.
What aired before it?
A new primetime serial needs a strong lead-in, right? Something established to pass the audience along. The Yellow Rose got absolutely nothing. Its lead-in was another new series called The Rousters, starring Chad Everett.
Never heard it.
Exactly. The Rousters was so weak, its ratings were so bad, NBC canceled it after only 4 episodes aired.
4 episodes, wow.
Think about that level of instability right before your expensive new drama comes on. You cannot possibly build a loyal audience base when the show before yours is that disastrously weak, or when half the potential audience is already settled in watching a movie on another channel.
And the ratings reflected this nightmare scenario immediately, didn't they? The panic must have set in at NBC headquarters right away.
Oh, instantly. The show performed terribly from the jump. Truly minuscule viewing numbers, considering the investment.
What were the numbers like?
Well, we can see the collapse week by week.
Yeah.
The premiere, okay, it was boosted by all the advertising, the big cast names. It hit about 16.1 million viewers.
Yeah.
Not amazing, but not a total disaster.
Okay, something to build on? Maybe.
Maybe. But then episode 2, facing the harsh reality of that Saturday slot, dropped sharply to 11.2 million.
It dropped.
And then episode 3, it dropped again, down to a terrifying 8.4 million viewers. Once those initial curiosity viewers tuned out, they just never came back.
And we have to remember, 8.4 million viewers in 1983 with only 3 major networks. That's catastrophic, isn't it?
Utterly catastrophic for a show like this. By the end of the 1983-84 season, The Yellow Rose finished way down in 90th place in the Nielsen rankings. A miserable 10.1 Nielsen rating.
What does that mean in simple terms?
It means fewer than 10.1% of all American homes with a TV were watching this show on average. For an expensive, star-studded, high-stakes, primetime soap, that's unthinkable failure.
And didn't it tie with another infamous show from that season?
It did. It tied for 90th place with, wait for it, Manimal?
Oh no, not Manimal. The show where the guy turned into Animal.
The very same. Widely considered one of the worst, most laughable shows ever made. To be tied in the ratings with Manimal, I mean, that's just a deep, deep corporate humiliation for NBC.
It's hard to see how any show could survive that time slot. But it sounds like the problems weren't just external. The show itself started to change, didn't it? Which probably didn't help.
No, that's what really compounded the disaster, the disastrous mid-season scripting swing. Because the producers, likely under pressure from the network, seeing those awful ratings, panicked. And they started sacrificing their own strong, unique initial vision.
Be blinked.
They totally blinked. And that panic led to, well, a complete creative collapse. If the show had just stayed true to its gritty, realistic Western core, maybe, just maybe, it could have found an audience eventually, built some word of mouth. But the network clearly started demanding changes, quick fixes.
And the critique is that the show went all wrong.
Yeah, it started abandoning that high drama and nuanced character stuff. It got weirdly messagey, apparently, turning complex conflicts into shallow bathos, as one critic put it, sentimental mush.
And this is where those bizarre storylines start popping up, the ones that sound completely out of place.
This is exactly where the network meddling, the desperate attempt to find anything that might grab viewers, becomes painfully obvious. That grounded Texas ranch drama was suddenly getting interrupted by these, frankly, goofy storylines that made zero sense for a show about a struggling cattle operation.
Like what specifically?
Suddenly, the Champion family is dealing with Pancho Villa's granddaughter showing up out of nowhere with tales of buried treasure on the ranch.
Buried treasure.
Seriously.
Seriously. Or they pivoted towards what one source calls liberal-minded NBC scripting with these awkward stories about illegal aliens, but where the Champions were apparently the only ranchers in Texas who wanted undocumented workers crossing their borders. It just felt preachy, disconnected from the core conflicts, and suddenly divorced from those high-stakes financial and family battles that anchored the first half of the season.
But the absolute low point, the moment that sounds like they completely jumped the shark, was that Elsie kidnapping episode.
Oh, God, yes. Elsie, Colleen's young daughter, she gets kidnapped by, and I quote, chicken hawks.
Chicken hawks. And taken to an exclusive, high-class bordello in Los Angeles.
What? A West Texas ranch drama suddenly detours to an LA bordello. How does that even happen?
I know, it's baffling. The critique calls this episode ridiculous, even insulting. Apparently, it played out like a bad, generic episode of Charlie's Angels. Nothing whatsoever to do with the show's core setting or themes.
That just feels like the ultimate creative betrayal, doesn't it? Taking this potentially great, authentic Western family saga and throwing them into some random LA crime plot.
It really does. And the source material even suggests those LA locations might have been a cost-cutting measure.
Oh, wow. Cheaper than shooting in Texas, maybe?
Possibly. Which speaks volumes about the network's nervousness and their willingness to completely compromise the narrative integrity, maybe save a few bucks, rather than stick with what made the show unique.
That loss of focus must have been devastating for viewers who liked the original concept. And it sounds like the cast started changing too, which never helps a serialized show.
No, that further compounded the problems. Serious casting and character attrition that completely undermined the emotional investment the audience had made.
Who left?
The first major loss was Susan Anspach, who played Grace McKenzie. The housekeeper, the one who is central to that four-way romantic triangle with Chance, Colleen, and Roy.
What happened to her character?
She just vanished. No explanation in the story after episode 9. Just gone.
Seriously? No write-out? Nothing?
Apparently not. And Grace wasn't a minor character. She was the main obstacle, the main source of tension between Chance and Colleen getting together. Contemporary reports suggest Anspach left because the lead role she thought she'd been promised turned into just a supporting part.
That's a huge mistake, narratively. Removing her just makes the central romance too easy, too fast, kills the tension.
Absolutely. Then there was the stunt casting that just fizzled out almost immediately. They brought in the Hollywood icon Jane Russell.
Wow, Jane Russell.
Yeah. As Rose Hollister Jebb's sister, and also Chance's long-lost mother. A move that really promised some juicy, maybe dynasty-style confrontations and melodrama.
Sounds like a great idea on paper.
Great idea. Could have injected some real energy. But then, as the source says, they inexplicably just dropped her character from the plot for 2 whole episodes right after introducing her.
What? Why would they do that?
Who knows? It completely killed any momentum or anticipation her arrival generated. She only came back later just to have a death scene, apparently. So her potential as this major, maybe slightly campy addition was totally wasted. They couldn't even commit to the camp when they tried it.
Unbelievable, but the source material points to one mistake as being the most fatal. The one decision that really gutted the show's entire purpose.
Yes, the absolute killer blow, the unforgivable creative decision. They got rid of the main villain.
They got rid of Jeb Hollister, Chuck Connors.
They eliminated him from the show,
Yeah.
sent him off, presumably to jail or something. This was just creatively suicidal for a serial drama like this.
Huh.
Jeb was the show's engine. He was the raison d'etre.
He was the source of all the conflict.
Exactly. He was the source of Chance's internal war with his own heritage, and he was the constant existential threat forcing Roy to fight for the ranch's integrity. When you remove the central antagonist, the primary source of conflict, in a show built entirely around that conflict, what's left? The audience just tunes out.
But wait, in shows like Dallas, didn't the villains always come back? Like, JR would get shot or thrown in jail, but you knew he'd be back plotting revenge. Didn't viewers expect Jeb to return?
That was absolutely the expectation. The audience was conditioned by Dallas and other soaps. You expect the main villain to survive or at least return from a temporary setback, vowing vengeance.
Yeah.
But Jeb, he never came back. Never. Once he was gone, the champions were just left without any truly formidable external pressure, which allowed the show to just flounder, focusing entirely on those boring internal squabbles and those bizarre, disconnected plots we mentioned.
And without that central granite-like villain anchoring things, the show just started throwing ineffective bad guys at the wall, didn't it?
Immediately, proving they had absolutely no long-term plan once Jeb was gone.
Yeah.
The descent here is just heartbreakingly clear if you like the initial premise.
What kind of villains did they bring in?
Suddenly you get Pat Hingle showing up with his sons to steal oil from the ranch. Just a boring, forgettable B-plot that went nowhere.
Okay.
And then, even worse, William Smith arrives to basically reenact a low-budget version of Cape Fear with the main cast, which critics at the time described as being done to very silly effect.
Oh, dear.
The show just completely lost its identity. It transformed from this potentially great, gritty Western epic into, I don't know, a poorly written procedural about a rotating cast of forgettable C-list criminals turning up at the ranch each week.
And what did any of that nonsense have to do with the original powerful vision, the struggling champion family, that huge ranch, the moral dilemmas?
Absolutely nothing. It was a total creative surrender. They threw out everything that made the show unique and interesting.
And that really is the definition of a failed deep dive, isn't it? A show that just fundamentally stops being what it promised the audience it would be.
Exactly. It tried to be a Western epic, then it tried to be a generic 80s action crime show.
Yeah.
And in the end, it just failed miserably, it being either one.
It's amazing it even lasted 22 episodes, frankly. But despite the ratings disaster, the cancellation after just one season, The Yellow Rose did manage to leave behind one very significant and kind of contradictory pop culture footprint, didn't it?
Yeah, we absolutely have to talk about the music. Because while the show itself might have been languishing down there with Manimal in the ratings basement,
A painful comparison.
it is. But its theme song achieved massive, massive commercial success. It's probably the most famous, most remembered part of the show today for many people.
The theme song, also called The Yellow Rose, right? It used that traditional tune.
Exactly. Set to the classic, instantly recognizable melody of The Yellow Rose of Texas. But they commissioned brand new, show-specific lyrics for it. And those lyrics and the arrangement, they perfectly captured that big, epic, romantic Texas feeling that the show itself was originally aiming for.
And who performed it?
It was performed by the country music duo Johnny Lee and Lane Brody. And the song just took off. It became a massive #1 hit on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart.
Number one, while the show was bombing.
#1. On April 21st, 1984. Now think about that timing. This is well into the show's run, just a few weeks before it was officially canceled in May, long after the TV ratings had completely flatlined.
That's such a bizarre contradiction, isn't it? The show is a spectacular failure, but its theme song is a runaway smash hit all across the country. What does that even tell us?
Well, I think it tells us a couple things. One, the show must have had incredible initial presentation and hype. The concept clearly resonated with people, and the music captured that epic romantic concept perfectly. People liked the idea of the show.
Okay.
And two, the song definitely benefited from being played constantly as promotion on NBC, right?
Yeah.
It reached millions of people who heard the song but never actually bothered to tune in on that deadly Saturday night slot to watch the show itself. The song successfully sold the dream of a grand Texas saga, a dream the show's later plots just couldn't live up to.
It certainly suggests the core problem wasn't a failure of marketing or presentation, at least initially. It was a failure of execution and, critically, placement.
Absolutely. But in the end, music success couldn't save the show. Those dismal TV ratings finishing 82nd out of all primetime shows for the season that sealed its fate. It ran for that one full season, 22 episodes, from October 2nd, 1983 to May 12th, 1984, and then NBC pulled the plug. Gone. And it's also important to zoom out just a little bit and remember, The Yellow Rose wasn't an isolated failure for NBC that year. Their entire new show lineup for the 83-84 season was basically a disaster.
Really? Nothing worked.
Not one of their new dramas introduced that fall was renewed for a second season. Not one. That includes The Rousters, the terrible lead-in. It includes Manimal. It includes everything else they tried. The network was in such dire straits creatively and ratings-wise that year. Honestly, even if The Yellow Rose had done slightly better, it still might have gotten canceled just because the whole ship was sinking.
That's bleak. But interestingly, there must have been some lingering affection or curiosity about the show because NBC actually reran the entire series again in 1990, didn't they? Paired with Brett Maverick reruns.
They did. Which I think speaks to the perceived quality of those early episodes and definitely the star power of that cast. People remembered Sam Elliott and Sybil Shepherd. Even the show itself was a blur.
And it eventually got a DVD release, too.
Yeah, much later. Warner Bros. Released the complete series on DVD in 2011 through their Warner Archive collection, which caters to cult classics and harder-to-find shows. That proves there was still an audience out there curious about what might have been. People remembered the premise, they definitely remembered the actors, and they absolutely remembered that massive hit song. They just couldn't quite remember why they stopped watching it back in '84.
So let's try to synthesize this whole fascinating failure. We had the high ambition, the great cast, that compelling initial vision of gritty realism. Why did it ultimately fall apart, and what's the takeaway lesson here for television?
I think it really boils down to a perfect storm of failures, both external and internal. First, you absolutely cannot ignore the fatal strategic blunder of that time slot. You just don't launch your expensive, high-stakes new serial drama on Saturday night at 10 p.m. against blockbuster movies. It was doomed from the start, schedule-wise.
Right, setting it up to fail.
Pretty much. Second, that initial audience perception, maybe fatigue, the feeling that it might just be another Dallas knockoff, probably hurt its ability to draw in viewers who were maybe getting a little tired of the genre by '83.
And third, and maybe most importantly, that internal creative collapse was the real killer.
Absolutely. The producers, the network, they lost faith in their own unique, authentic vision. They panicked. They abandoned that compelling Shakespearean tragedy meets giant vibe.
They started throwing in aliens, buried treasure, L.A. bordellos.
Exactly. Ridiculous, messagey storylines totally divorced from the Texas setting. And critically, fatally, they eliminated the core dramatic engine, Chuck Connor's Jeb Hollister. That ripped the heart out of the show's conflict for both Chance and Roy.
So it couldn't survive the bad time slot, the audience perception issues, and the internal confusion about what kind of show it even wanted to be.
Precisely. It couldn't decide if it wanted to be an authentic, grounded Western epic or a cheesy, generic Charlie's Angels episode. By trying to be both, or maybe just flailing wildly, it ended up failing at being either one.
It's really a remarkable and obviously very expensive example of how even a superb foundation, great cast, great premise, critical potential can be completely ruined by terrible strategic scheduling and maybe fear-based, inconsistent writing from panicked executives.
I think the creative lesson there is pretty clear. Inconsistency is a viewer killer. You make a promise to the audience about what your show is.
Gotta stick to it.
You got to stick to it. The knowledge here is valuable when applied. The audience might forgive a slow start or maybe a B-plot that doesn't quite land, but they will never forgive a show that fundamentally stops being what it promised them it would be. They just changed the channel.
The Yellow Rose was more than a soap. It was a portrait of the American frontier reborn in the 1980s where love, legacy, and loyalty were tested under the blazing Texas sun.
Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this look back at The Yellow Rose, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
And definitely tell us in the comments which classic soap opera should we explore next.